Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Tucson Festival of Books, the teen and tween audio interviews. I'm Amy Morris, and I'm one of the librarians here at Pima County Public Library. And Carl Murdoch is one of my associates, and we're going to be moderating and facilitating this interview today. And today we're interviewing Neal Schusterman with Tanque Verde High School, who have read his book Game Changer. So welcome, Neal. Welcome, Tanque Verde High School. Welcome, Neal.
Thank you. Did I hear that correctly, that you've all already read Game Changer? Oh, that is great. This is the first group of students that I'm speaking to that's actually read the book. So I'm really excited about this.
Yay. So if whoever is first wants to go for it.
Hi. Why did you dedicate Game Changer to those who have been victims of ignorant cockroaches, and what's the story behind that?
I realized that, the book is about, racism and homophobia and sexism. And I wanted to dedicate the book to everyone who's been victims of hate crimes. There's a point in the book where I say that ignorance is like a cockroach. It hides in corners and darts out when you least expect it, and it's hard to kill. So the idea of the cockroaches of ignorance, I felt that was a good way to dedicate it. And then I wanted to create a list of as many different people who have been victims of hate crimes as I could. And so I did a lot of research and got this whole list together. And I thought it's almost like a memorial, and the idea that the names start large and they get smaller and smaller until you see how many thousands of people. And it's like, of course, I can't get all of them, but to give a sense of all the people who have been victims of hate crimes.
So the issues covered in Game Changer are obviously very complex. Was it difficult to address so many different topics in one single story?
It was, but it was a choice that I made early on. I didn't want to delve into a single topic. I felt that the whole idea of this story was to give Ash this crash course in all different perspectives on life, all of these different issues. And I couldn't get to every single issue that's out there, but I wanted to choose ones that were particularly poignant. Racism, sexism, homophobia, abusive relationships, male toxic masculinity. And so I sort of outlined the different types of experiences that he would have in the course of the story. And the idea being that at the end, when he comes out of this experience, he is going to be a better person for having seen all of these perspectives, and is going to address them in a meaningful way beyond the end of the book.
With writing this book, what challenges did you encounter while writing?
So there were so many challenges. I mean, when you're writing a book that really hits all of these sensitive issues, I wanted to be very, very careful to make sure that I address them properly. That I had a lot of people read the book throughout the process, different scenes, different chapters in the whole book, but people from all different walks of life, other authors, authors of color who read it, friends in the LGBTQ community, and also, women who've been in abusive relationships, and really talk with them about, what I was trying to do, and asking, did I accomplish that? Did you ever feel like I was, talking down, or that I was not really addressing the issue properly? And the responses that I've got were very, very helpful in helping me hone it. But the challenge of telling a story that is really touching a lot of hot button issues was very difficult. I had to tread very carefully, but at the same time, not be afraid of saying things. I felt that if I started to pull punches, if I didn't if I started to be too afraid to write what I felt that I needed to write for the story, then what would be the point of writing it? So it was quite, it was a lot of soul searching, a lot of human research in terms of speaking to just so many different people to really make the book the best that it could be. And also the world was changing. I mean, I started Game Changer 4 years ago. The stuff that I wrote when I first started, I had to pretty much throw it all away because society's changes, because of all the things that have happened over the past couple of years. I was rewriting this all the way down through September, long after the book was supposed to be completely done, because I kept going back and telling my editor, no, I need to change this. I need to make it, now with the world that we're living in now, and in a post George Floyd world, and in a world that's dealing with the pandemic, I really had to go through it and make it relevant to the world we're in now.
So often characters' names, or names in general, they have meaning or deeper things to them. How did you come up with these names for the characters?
All of the names, except for the Edwards, all of the names are Facebook fans. I name my characters after Facebook fans. Basically, whenever I'm starting a new book or I need characters for a book, I'll put a post up on Facebook, on my Facebook fan page, saying, who wants to have a character named after them? And I'll get a few hundred responses. And what I'll do is I'll go through that and I'll make a list of first names and last names, and then I'll cross them over. So Ash Bowman, 2 kids who were fans. And I knew that I wanted to choose a name for the main character that could be androgynous, but not obviously androgynous. So the idea of Ash, that no one would think that Ash was a woman, but the whole idea that his actual name is Ashley. And then I thought, wait, that was a guy's name once, wasn't it? Oh, wait. Gone with the Wind, Ashley Wilkes. And Gone with the Wind being such a racist movie, and have him mention that right at the beginning, it sort of starts to set the stage for the entire story.
So, as was mentioned earlier, that there were a lot of sensitive topics in the book. So how much research went into your writing, and did you learn anything new from this research?
There's always a lot of research that goes into a story like this. And a lot of the things that I learned, just it came from people. One of the things, it's a lot of it is not so much stuff that I learned, but realizations that I came to, that the character came to while writing the story. The whole section about abusers, and how the media always portrays abusers as obvious. You can always see the abuser in a story, in movies and TV, and you feel kind of a little bit smug because, oh, you can see that this person is abusive. Why can't that poor woman not see? Why are they so blind to it? And the whole idea that abusers are much subtler than that, and slip into your life in ways that are unguarded, that you aren't expecting. And I think it's important for people to realize that, because if you don't realize how insidious abuse can be, then you're left vulnerable. So that was one of the revelations that I had while working on it. Another one is when I started to research Brown versus the Board of Education and the circumstances surrounding the end of segregation in the U.S. I mean, there were a couple of things that really stood out that I never realized before. That whole bit about how we were trying to show that we had the moral high ground over the Soviet Union during the Cold War, and how that influenced the end of segregation. That's true. I mean, that really happened. And if we were not in the Cold War, if we were not trying to outdo Russia's nukes, would segregation have ended if we didn't have that global social pressure to try to appear better than the Soviet Union? I don't know the answer to that, but it's interesting and scary to think about all of the unseen hidden forces in history that shape things that we don't even consider, and what things are going on right now that we're oblivious to, that that are setting the stage for things in the future that might not be so good. You know, it's eye-opening. Another thing about segregation that I learned, and actually this was from a podcast that I had listened to about the subject, was that when segregation ended, a lot of Black teachers were fired, and there was this whole slew of Black teachers that didn't have jobs. And what they ended up doing is that they moved the Black kids into classrooms with white kids, all with white teachers, and suddenly these Black kids no longer had figures of authority that they could respect and look up to, because it was just all white teachers. And so what they realized is that what they needed to do was to integrate the teaching staff first, and it wasn't done. And so even with our best intentions of integration, we missed a crucial step, and it led to a lot of problems, because there is evidence that shows that when kids don't see people that look like them in positions of authority, they are less likely to graduate, less likely to do well in school. And so all of the consequences of not having the foresight to see that, I never realized any of that until I started to do research about this.
So in the story, Ash goes through multiple alternate dimensions and he sees different things. Were there any other interesting dimensions you were considering writing about in the book that you might have not done due to time or anything like that? I had wanted to deal with the version of Ash that was trans, but I felt that not that it was already addressed in him becoming a woman, but it felt like it was muddy. It would muddy things because it was too similar, so it was kind of a decision that I made to not go in that direction. I can't address every issue in the book, so I had to pick the ones that kind of really seemed to work well within the framework of the story, and didn't step into each other's territory.
Why did you call the center of the universe a subloc?
Oh, the subloc, the subjective locus. I wanted the Edwards to have fancy terms for everything. And so I thought that, so I had to come up with a term that would be the scientific sounding term. And so subjective locus, the idea that, you are subjectively the center of the universe, and locus, of course, is the center. So that's where that came from. And of course, subloc for short.
So obviously throughout the book, there's a bunch of alter egos while they're switching dimensions or realities. What made you want to write about alter egos within this book?
When you're world building, you have to set up the rules and then follow those rules. And I felt that one of the most important rules was that Ash retained memory of all of these different worlds. Because if he didn't, then he would not have experienced all those different lives. He would not, come out with the perspective that he needed. So the basic rule was that, he's the only one who remembers the other universes. And in the new world, he remembers everything that happened to him, not just previously, but he knows who he is in this new world. And he has all of the memories of the lifetime in this world. So he can see who he became in the world where he was wealthy, who he became in the world where the United States was still segregated, who he became in the world where he's gay and closeted. And so I felt it was really important for him to be able to reflect on all of those versions of himself, and ultimately at the end, integrate them all into one.
Okay, so in the book, you made Ash's sexuality change in some of the dimensions. What motivated you to write him this way? And did his experience in all of these alternate dimensions change his sexual identity?
Well, from the beginning, I knew that I wanted him to, the basics, what made me want to tell the story was knowing the basics already. The idea started many years ago. I was at a school visit speaking to students, and a kid raised a question and asked me, "Hey, how come you never wrote a football story?" So I said, well, if I ever had an idea that lent itself to be told as a football story, I would. And he asked, well, what would it be about? And so I said, I don't know, maybe about a football player who hits so hard he bounces into other dimensions. It was off the top of my head, got a laugh from the audience. And that night I couldn't sleep because I couldn't stop thinking about this idea. Now, that really wasn't an idea. It was pretty much just a gimmick. It's just this, one-liner that, that could you use to develop a story. So for years, I kind of sat on it until I thought, well, what if these altered dimensions are all different social dimensions? What if he has to face all of these social issues? And as soon as I came up with that, it sort of came to me. Oh, there'll be a world in which where he's facing racism. There'll be a world in which he's gay. There's going to be a world in which he's even a woman. And right away, I knew those core things. And then developing out from there was really, the challenge. But once I kind of had that core of the different things that Ash would have to face, I knew I had a story worth telling.
Did you base anything in the book on real events, places, or people?
I'm thinking if there, the book refers to things historically and refers to things that have actually happened. But other than that, the characters and situations are all entirely fictional.
So in the back of the book, you were writing your acknowledgments and you talked about the world being back to normal somehow. Did you think that the world would be back to normal when you published the book?
Back to normal as in post-COVID? I finished my first draft of the book right around the time that the pandemic started. I went through multiple drafts. By the time it got to September, when I was done with it, I thought we would be out of this by now. Of course, back in last March, a year ago, I thought we'd be out of it by April. Then in April, I realized, it's going to be a little bit longer. We'll be out of it by July. And then by July, I thought, you know what, we're going to be out of it by September. And now I've just given up trying to guess. But yeah, I did think that the pandemic would be over and we would go back to whatever our new normal is by now. And we're starting to get there, but it's taken a long time. And a lot more people died of COVID than when I was writing the book. I think I even mentioned in either the acknowledgement or the chapter notes, which is in one of the special editions, that when I wrote the book, 200,000 people had died of COVID. And it looked like it was going to be going substantially higher. In the book, I tried to make, in the book, 1 million people died. And I realized that, or 1 million people in the US, and I realized that number, we might actually meet that number, which was supposed to be so far-fetched and so beyond reality, and yet we're past 500,000 now. So,
sorry, you cut out at that last bit. Can you repeat it?
I was just saying that that when I was working on the book, I had no idea when the pandemic would end, and it's gone on much longer than I think any of us had expected. And I'm looking forward to there being a new normal. I don't think we'll ever return to what normal was before, but we are going to find a new normal. And, always looking at the bright side of things, I think there's going to be some positive things that come out of it. I think that, first of all, the environment has been helped by the fact that there's not as many cars on the road and there's not as many, flights. I think that people will be working more from home because people have gotten used to this format. And so that's going to be helpful in different ways. I think that we're going to appreciate certain things more, appreciate being able to be with people again, and appreciate being able to be out in the world. And hopefully that will be a positive thing for us to combat all of the negative stuff.
So based on all of the different events of the past year, how did all of those events influence your writing of Game Changer?
Well, Ash had to be a post-COVID, post-George Floyd kid. He had to be a kid who had lived through all of this. And that was, that required quite a lot of rewriting while I was working on it. I mean, you can't, because I didn't know when the pandemic was going to end, I knew that the story had to take place sometime after. But it couldn't be, I couldn't write a story in which it was just ignored as if it never happened. There had to be consequences. There had to be things that he was thinking about, the whole idea of his grandfather dying of COVID in the other world. And also the whole idea of, going out and protesting with Leo. There's not a kid, I don't think, in America who has not seen, the brutality, police brutality and the institutionalized racism that's been going on. I mean, he could not have been completely blind to it. So he needed to be aware of it, but I realized just being aware of it isn't enough. And so I added that whole bit where he talks about protesting with Leo and all the people honking their horns in support, and how that made Leo angry, because the whole idea of, honk if you hate racism doesn't do anything but make you feel better, as if you don't have any other responsibility other than honking your horn in support. And Ash never got that. Now he gets that ending institutionalized racism is more than just, cheering on, people who are fighting the racism. It's, you have to actually do something and not just sit back and feel good about yourself because you honked your horn.
So what is your hope for the future of this book? Like, in the hope of the readers reading it, what is your hope for the future that it will live on?
My hope is that kids who read it will suddenly be able to see these points of view. And like Ash, I think there's a lot of kids like Ash out there who don't consider themselves racist, don't consider themselves homophobic or sexist. But when they start to see themselves in Ash and realize that it's not so much the things that they've done that's the problem, it's the things that they've ignored, it's the things that they haven't done. It's turning a blind eye to the problem. And hopefully, the readers will stop turning that blind eye and will be more instrumental in bringing about change.
So what's next for you as an author?
As an author, the next book coming out is called Roxy. And that one I co-wrote with my son, Jared, who I co-wrote the book Dry with, if any of you have read Dry. Roxy is another standalone book, and it is about the opioid crisis. And it's told from a unique point of view. It's told from the point of view of the drugs themselves. The drugs are like Greek gods. They exist in their eternal party in the sky, and they descend to earth to wreak havoc in the lives of humanity. So Roxy is OxyContin, and she's beautiful. She's a seductress. It's very easy to fall in love with her, and she takes away your pain, but also your relationship with her is a codependent one, because once you fall in love with Roxy, you can't let her go, and she knows it. And so that is Roxy. It's coming out in November, and the earliest responses to it have been very, very positive. And like Game Changer, I hope it's when people read it, it will change your perspective, and it will give you a new way to look at the addictive nature of these substances.
You're an author, and you probably have dealt with this. How do you push through writer's block and find inspiration to get through writer's block?
By not believing in writer's block. Sometimes writing is easy. Sometimes those words flow faster than you can write them, and you're in the state of flow and it feels so good, and then it stops. It always stops. Now, people call that writer's block. That's not writer's block. That's writing. Writing isn't always easy. Writing is sometimes painful. It's like staring at a blank page until these beads of blood form on your forehead. It feels like you'll never work your way through it. that is just part of the writing process. Writing isn't always fun. Writing isn't always easy, but you have to be willing to work through the hard parts just as much as you're willing to fly through the easy parts. If you call it writer's block, that kind of gives you an excuse not to work through the hard part of writing. But if you just understand that it's always going to be that way, that you're always going to have those places where nothing seems to be working, where you feel brain dead, but also know that you will be able to work your way through it and that it's just a normal part of the process, you'll always be able to get through writer's block.
As a teen, what did you want to be when you grew up?
As a teen, what did I want to be when I grew up? I wanted to be so many different things. They were all creative. I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be an architect. I wanted to do all of these creative things. But writing emerged as the thing that I was the most passionate about. I had a great English teacher in ninth grade that challenged me to write a story a month for extra credit. By the end of ninth grade, I felt like a writer. And so I kept on writing. When I was in college, I had a double major. I double majored in psychology, which is the science of the mind and behavior, and theater, which is the art of the mind and behavior. And while I did a lot of acting when I was in college for my theater degree, I found that there were people who were acting and this was their life. I mean, they didn't want to do anything else. It was the focus of their existence. It wasn't the focus of my existence. I just liked it. But what I liked more, I liked writing plays that other people performed. And that's when I really realized that my calling, that my passion was through the written word. And so I wrote all different kinds of things. I wrote short stories. I wrote articles. I wrote a humor column for my university's paper. I tried to write episodes of TV shows. I wrote movie scripts. And then I took these stories that I used to tell when I was a counselor at summer camp. And I guess during my college years, I was working my summers as a counselor. I would take those stories that I would tell and I wrote them into books. And the first thing that sold were those stories, were those books that I wrote based on the stories that I told as a counselor. And so that's the direction my career went.
So this is our last written question. What do you consider to be your greatest accomplishment in your life so far?
Career-wise, what is my greatest accomplishment? I think it's so hard to say. But of all of my books, I would say Challenger Deep. Challenger Deep is a story about mental illness, and it was inspired by my other son, Brendan's experiences with mental illness. It's not a biography. It's not about him, but I took his artwork and used it to create a story, and also a lot of the experiences that he went through as a teenager. I sort of folded into the fictional story in Challenger Deep. And that's the one that won the National Book Award. But more than that, I can't tell you how many people have come up to me and have said that this book has changed their life. People have come up to me and said that Challenger Deep saved their lives. So to me, to know that something that I've written has had such a profound effect on people, that means more to me than anything.
Thank you, Neal. That was great. And thank you, Tanque Verde High School. Yes. Great questions as well.
And if there's any other questions, I'll be happy to answer them if you have anything else you want to ask.
Anybody have any other questions?
What are you looking forward in 2021? Like, what is your excitement? What are you looking forward to?
I am looking forward to traveling again. I am looking forward to, I have 4 kids, and my youngest daughter, who's in college but taking all her classes online, of course, is here with me. But my other 3 I haven't seen since this whole thing started, and so I'm looking forward to visiting my son Jared, and my daughter Joelle in California when I can fly again, when it's safe, and also my eldest son, Brendan, he lives in Thailand. He teaches English at a school in Thailand, and I haven't seen him for much more than a year. Usually I would go 2 or 3 times a year to visit him. And, even after I get the vaccine and I can fly, the border to Thailand is closed to Americans. So I have no idea when I'll be able to go again. But once they open that border and I'm there. I mean, I'll fly out and I'll stay a few weeks. And so that's what I'm looking forward to most in 2021, getting to see my kids.
What book or book series was the most fun for you to write?
The book series that was the most fun to write was the Accelerati trilogy. Tesla's Attic, Edison's Alley, and Hawking's Hallway. I co-wrote that with my friend Eric Elfman. They're funny. We made each other laugh while writing it. They were just so much fun to write. They were kind of I've always been a big fan of Douglas Adams and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And we wrote those books with that in mind, with that feel. There's one story. There's a teacher who said that her class, that she was reading the book, one of the books it's sustained silent reading in class. And she read something that made her laugh while she was drinking some coffee, and it shot out of her nose. And that became like all the students all remember, the book that made her have a literal spit take. So I love hearing that. I love when something that I've written that's supposed to be funny makes people laugh out loud. And I love hearing when I write something that is emotional, has brought people to tears. If I can reach the emotion I was aiming for, I'm happy.
So when you started your love for writing and reading, what authors did you look up to, and what authors do you still look up to this day?
Oh, I loved Roald Dahl when I was in elementary school. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I remember thinking, when you're a kid, when something occurs to you that's obvious, but it wasn't obvious to you until you thought of it. I had seen the original movie, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the original with Gene Wilder, not the creepy one with Johnny Depp. And then I read the book after seeing the movie. And when I read the book, I had this realization. This didn't exist until Roald Dahl thought of it. The Oompa Loompas and Willy Wonka and that Chocolate Factory, none of this existed in the world until he came up with it in his head. And I was amazed by that. And I remember thinking, I want to be able to do that. In middle school, I read Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. And I remember thinking, these books don't feel like books to me. They feel like they're windows into a world that is so much more than the pages of those books. And I remember thinking, I want to be able to do that. High school, I got into Stephen King. I remember I would stay up late in the middle of the night. I couldn't stop turning those pages. I would scare myself to death. I couldn't, when I read The Shining when I was in 10th grade, I had to sleep with the lights on because I was just so terrified. I was afraid to look in mirrors and see a red room written on, it was, but the way he kept me turning those pages, I said to myself, I want to be able to do that. So those are some of the authors that I grew up with that really were influential to me. And I mentioned Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Douglas Adams. I read those when I was a freshman in college, and they made me laugh out loud. And the idea of something that you read that just makes you laugh out loud and go into giggle fits, I just love that. So those are some of the authors that have influenced me.
What made you want to write science fiction? What was the idea that made you want to write books that were of that genre?
It's interesting. When I was in high school, that's all I wrote. I mean, I loved writing short stories, and all my stories were Twilight Zone kind of short stories, or or Black Mirror. Black Mirror is my favorite TV show, by the way, because that's my mind. My mind is right where Black Mirror is. But I was writing those kinds of stories, and then when I got to college, I had a professor who said 2 words to me that changed my life. Stop that. Because I was writing all of these science fiction, surrealistic stories. And he said, don't do that anymore. And I said, why? And he said, because you already can. That's what you've been doing. You're doing the same thing over and over again. Different stories, but the same basic style. What genre would you be least interested in writing in? And I said, probably romance. And he said, okay, your assignment is to write a romance. But you can't write a sci-fi romance. That's cheating. And so I wrote a story that was romantic, and then he had me write a Western and a mystery. He had me explore all of these different types of genres. And I started to realize that I really enjoyed telling stories about people. People going through extraordinary circumstances. Didn't have to be science fiction, didn't have to be fantasy, but just human beings faced with extraordinary circumstances. My early novels were not science fiction. Then I came back to writing science fiction and fantasy, and I realized I was a much better writer now because my stories weren't about the science fiction and fantasy. They were about people in extraordinary circumstances. And so grounding it in real characters, real people dealing with these extraordinary things is really what made me much better as a writer. So the best two words that were ever told to me, stop that, because it forced me to have to become a much better writer.
Have you ever written a fan fiction or an AU about, based off of a TV show or a book you have read?
Yes. I had a thing back to when I was in high school. Star Wars, the original, now they call it Episode 4, but when I was 14, it was just Star Wars. There was only one. And life-changing experience when I saw that. I mean, I knew this is like one of the best movies ever made. It's going to change, filmmaking, and I was proved right. But I couldn't wait for them to write a sequel. So I wrote my own sequel to Star Wars, and it had a really original title. It was called Star Wars 2. And I actually wrote the script and found a mailing address for George Lucas and made copies of it and sent him off my script, and never heard back from him. And then, of course, Empire Strikes Back came out and Return of the Jedi. I had actually started with my friends to film this old little stupid with a little Super 8 camera that they had back in the 80s. I started to film some scenes. I blew up a planet in my backyard. Okay, see, now you've brought up all of these memories. I had a friend who knew a kid who used to stand in the corner and sell illegal fireworks. And I shudder to think what he's selling now, but this kid, he was this 10-year-old kid who would stand in the corner and he would sell cherry bombs and blockbusters and things like a blockbuster is a quarter of a stick of dynamite. That's how powerful that is. And I bought for $10, I bought a blockbuster from him, and I made this big paper mache planet that was like about that big and created a fake backdrop and hung it in my backyard. The first scene that I filmed was the exploding planet. And I set up this barricade of all of the lawn furniture because I knew this thing was going to blow and I wanted to be behind it. So I sort of hid the camera. And then I wasn't stupid enough to light the thing. I had a friend, my friend Marino Pignataro, this big, macho Italian kid. And I told him he was the director of pyrotechnics for the film. And he thought that was very impressive. And all that meant was that he got to light the blockbuster. So he lit the blockbuster, put it in the planet, dove out of the way. I'm filming, and the planet blew up, and the backdrop blew up, and half the plants in the backyard blew up. And the entire neighborhood, all of the windows went up, wondering what this explosion was, and we got out of there. I mean, we ran and hid. And that was the end of Star Wars 2. So that was my fan fiction. I blew up a planet.
Completely unrelated question, but how did you come up with the plot for Scythe?
Scythe actually started when I was, but after I had written Unwind, which is a dystopian series. I wrote Unwind when Unwind was published the same year that Hunger Games was published. And so it sort of came out at the beginning of the wave of teen dystopia. And after all of those years of teen dystopia, the last thing I wanted to do was write another dystopian novel. So I thought, well, how can I tell a futuristic story that kind of takes the idea of dystopia and flips it? So I thought, well, the one thing that all dystopian stories have in common is that they are all about the world gone wrong. What if I write a story about the world gone right? What happens when all of these terrible scenarios that these stories predict, don't happen. What happens when we get what we want? A world without war, a world without racism, a world without disease, a world without poverty, ultimately, a world where artificial intelligence isn't this monster like the Matrix or Terminator, but AI ends up being good. It ends up being this benevolent force. All the things we want in the world, what do we end up having? And the more I researched that, the more I started getting pointed to life extension websites and all of these projects to extend human life. And I realized, there is going to come a point at which we figure out how to stop the human aging process. It's not that far in the future. And once that happens, the genie is out of the bottle. I mean, it's like suddenly the human race will technically be immortal. What happens then? If we steal death from nature, we're left holding it. People are still going to have to die, but if nature is no longer taking care of that for us, we're going to have to be the ones who choose. How in this quote unquote perfect world do we choose who lives and who dies? And every idea I came up with was dystopian. The computers decide. No, that's scary. The government decides. No, that's even scarier. So I thought, in a perfect world, the Jedi would decide. The Jedi of death. What would the Jedi of death be like? Well, they would be these regal characters who would walk around in these distinctive robes. They would be honorable. They would be the wise ones. They would be enlightened, and they would be the ones that everybody trusts to make this decision. But of course, when you have that much power, corruption is bound to work its way in. So that's where Scythe came from.
Great. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Neal. Thank you, Tanque.
You're very welcome.
Yeah.
Great questions. It was great chatting with all of you. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thanks, Neal.
Thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much
Thank you.
for coming.
Thank you.